got for people so far?
I have 4, but you don't add, and here comes Dan Bennett, so 5. And you don't actually need a quorum because you're not voting on anything.
Correct.
Now Cindy just dropped off, so I assume she got accidentally booted out. I'm sure she'll be in.
Okay.
Yeah, here she comes. Let me let her in, and then I'll screen share the document. She's in. Okay, so let me go to screen share. Share screen document. You guys got that?
Yep, we do.
Right. All right, so I'm going to move this over here. I should have track changes active. Okay, so 7:01, you are recording. If you'd like to call to order, Mr. Acting Chairman.
Yes, I will. I'm calling to order the PZC Subcommittee meeting on September 25th at 7:00 p.m. This is for the regulations. Tara will be actually leading the meeting on all of this stuff, and all commissioners that are here tonight, you will be able to speak, but just do not interrupt until, if you got a question, then you just put it forward to me first and I'll continue it, or Tara can continue it at the same place. Is that understood? Everybody needs to say yes or no to it.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you. All right, Tara, I'm gonna hand it over to you, and if there's anything that you need me to help you with, I will, to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much. Just for the sake of doing the minutes, I'm just going to indicate that in the meeting are myself, John B. Lenke, Dan Bennett, Jane Salsi, Alvin Hill, Ray Williams, and Cindy Dunn, and I will note if anybody comes in.
Okay.
So we'll proceed in the same fashion that we have before, and well, for everybody's sake, but particularly for Dan, since he is new here.
Oh, excuse me 1 minute there, Ms. Tara. Dan, I would like to welcome you into the subcommittee meeting. So this way it'll give you an idea what goes on and everything. And don't be afraid to ask a question if you feel it's necessary. Okay, so welcome aboard.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
All right, Tara.
Yeah, and if you guys are using raise hand function, sometimes I can't see the raised hands in screen share. So if you've got your hand up and it seems like I'm not noticing you, just take yourself off mute and go ahead. So again, just for format purposes and to let Dan know how we've done this particularly. So every year, since we did the full overhaul in 2020, Randy Blackmer's coming in at 7:03. Every year since we did the overhaul in 2020, the commission committed to doing an annual review to tweak it here and there, right? Because we did the whole book of regulations and it was reasonable to assume that some changes wouldn't behave exactly the way that we thought they would, or that we would discover things that we had left out, or there would be legislative changes that would mandate that we make changes. And we've had instances of all those things. At this point, it was previously that we could be a little loosey-goosey about the time frame or even do more than one in a year. But since we've gone to the online code, in other words, a contractor maintains our online regulations, there are costs associated with our updates. So now we really are limited to one a year. And because last year we introduced a 1-year moratorium on cannabis microcultivators, we actually have a specific time frame for this year, which is that we'll have to accept for public hearing in January and do the public hearing in February, so that whatever the commission decides to do with that moratorium will it'll either expire, or whatever changes you guys choose to adopt will be active within the 1-year time frame. And when we do these, I just run the document in the order that they would appear in the online regulations, just for ease of keeping track of where we are. And this year is actually pretty modest. There's a couple of definitions either suggested for changing or addition. One little thing in gravel, in the graveling section, that was suggested as a deletion. It's small but important. And then the big thing is the cannabis microcultivator moratorium. Based on the last planning and zoning meeting, at the next one of these, which we have not yet scheduled, I will also have at least something for you guys to consider regarding food trucks. But there just wasn't enough time for me to do it for this because I've been in Hartford all week. Okay, so now charging forward. In chapter 2, 2.4 definitions, here is a suggested definition of junkyard, a use matching the definition described in Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 405, Section 21-9, 2A and B, as may be amended. Any place in or on which old metal, glass, paper, cordage, or other waste or discarded or secondhand material which has not been a part or is not intended to be a part of any motor vehicle is stored or deposited. Junkyard, there. Junkyard does not mean an automated kiosk for consumer electronics that satisfies the requirements established in section 21A-446. And my contextualizing comment was that this definition was suggested by the wetlands agent, and it was partly based on the application that you guys considered earlier this year for the use of the property that used to be Frank Jake's behind Sonny's Market. There was concern that what he was proposing met the statutory definition of junkyard, and that therefore he would have had to meet those state requirements. But because we didn't have a junkyard definition in our regs, we didn't have a good way to address it. So that's the contextualizing piece. The other piece of that, as you can see here, is if you add the definition, then you also have to decide what it means for your tables of uses. In other words, are we adding it as a definition and prohibiting it everywhere, or are you allowing it in certain districts? Because if you just add the definition and it's not referenced in the regulations, you're still defining a term that you have no guidelines for, which is why you took it out in the first place. Make sense?
Yep, I think that makes a little sense. So in other words, let's use the RRAD. Right now, there can't be any type of business like with a junkyard or whatever, that even though it's been, there's a couple places that have been around that are more or less grandfathered in, but as a new business coming in, I think we have to look at that with this proposal, since we've already, I'm not talking the main district, DMRD district, but the RRA and stuff like that. We must consider that.
Right. So the way your regulations are currently constructed, the base assumption, because it is not defined and is not included anywhere in the regulations, the base assumption is that it is not permitted. However, without a specific prohibition, anybody could make an application for any district using the quote unquote safety valve language. Yeah. And you could consider them on a case-by-case basis, but that's not a great, for something like a junkyard, I would say that's not a great use of that safety valve language, because it is a use that's addressed in statute, and it would be one that would be controversial. So the questions before you are you going to allow it at all? Are you going to specifically prohibit it? And therefore, do you need a definition? So I'll let you guys discuss.
Tara, is Cynthia in or is she still out?
I think she came back in. Yeah, she's in.
Then my question would be to her as the zoning enforcement officer, what would be her opinion or insight on what she thinks would be the best avenue for us to decide on.
Wow. Thank you, John. Well, you don't really want junkyards in your district. And so I guess I have to ask the question, Tara, is what was the purpose of Meg bringing this up to put in our regulations with a suggestion that it should be in our regulations?
Of course, it's been a while since she and I discussed it, and the three of us actually discussed it at
Right.
some point. My feeling was that she thought we should define it because there are things that occur in town that might be meeting this definition that she has trouble identifying as violations because we haven't defined it, said where it's allowed, where it's not allowed. And from a wetlands point of view, she wants to have some kind of tool in the zoning regulations to point to say, look, you're running this junkyard on your property, and not only is it a wetlands problem, you really need to talk to the ZEO. I think this is not an allowed use at all, or it's only allowed in this district. Do you see what I'm saying? She's saying it gives us a tool for better enforcement, essentially.
Okay, so if you put the definition in, and then you put in every single table of uses in our districts, would you be putting no junkyards permitted in any district? Because it will create property problems.
Right. So I do think we also have to draw a distinction between a junkyard, which is a business, and just a junky yard, right? Because those are actually separate things, and we are not actually regulating against junky yards. People have the right to keep their properties poorly. It was the business use. So the commission may choose to prohibit it everywhere, or specifically prohibit it in certain districts and specifically allow it in others. The obvious choice, if the commission would be interested in allowing it as a legitimate business use, would be in the business development district, which was formerly zoned in, industrial. That's a legitimate choice. That is entirely at the discretion of the commission. I don't have super strong feelings about it. I do think it is within reason to consider allowing it specifically in the BDD and specifically prohibiting it in all other districts. But you could go the other way too. Jane, I see your hand up.
Okay. Can I speak?
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Okay.
I see your hand, so go ahead.
I wasn't sure whether you were through. How many, under this definition junkyard that we are seeing in red, how many of those are in town now?
I don't think we have an answer for that.
Well,
A lot, Jane.
A lot. Okay, but specifically being run as a business. I mean, I'm not talking junky yard. I'm talking
okay.
junkyard. I know there's a few places in town where there's junky yards. But I'm talking about actually having junkyard business.
two.
Two?
Yep.
John, where are they?
Well, you got RPM, Bob Marion's place on Route 12, and then you got the other one that just that's been
White House.
Limehouse, but okay, so
Right.
under the, okay, so maybe I'm not understanding this. Yeah, I know Limehouse, I know Bob Marion's. It is amended place, old metal glass, blah, 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 which has not been a part or is not intended to be a part of any motor vehicle. Define that a little bit better for me. I mean, I've always, in growing up, when I grew up, a junkyard meant old cars, you know, car parts, tires, wheels, battery, whatever. That's what the junkyard definition from my childhood.
Correct.
And what I'm seeing here is that it is not, because it says it is not part of or is not intended to be part of any motor vehicle. So are there two different things? Car junkyard one thing, and glass and, you know, metal and everything else something else?
Yes, yes. The answer to that, your question is that what you're referring to, and we'll just use the term for now of salvage yard.
Okay, thank you.
That is handled separately and is actually under the jurisdiction of the Zoning Board of Appeals by statute. And that's why there are separate definitions. So I would say the other piece of this, and I can't believe it didn't come immediately to mind, is that when Cindy and Meg and I were discussing this, it was, as you might imagine, in reference to 1097 Thompson Road, because that person, who we all know was a bad actor, did what he did because he could not be convinced otherwise that any business use was not allowable there. But if you have a specific prohibition in your table of uses for the RRAD that specifically says junkyard is not a permitted use, there is no ambiguity. And I think it was, again, Meg and Cindy both at the time were interested in removing any ambiguity, which I think is also a legitimate reason to consider.
So salvage yard would be for cars and such.
Correct.
Junkyard would be for everything else.
Yes, and I think they also call salvage yards and statute recycling yards, but I'm less certain of that. Cindy
No,
can tell you that.
you are correct, Tara.
Okay,
Yeah.
so junkyard then, yeah, you know, especially with what's happened at 1097.
That's one of the reasons what this is all about, Jane.
Yeah, no, I know, I get that. Okay, I get my thoughts on this. I mean, having the ability to have a junkyard, not a salvage yard, but a junkyard, I'm dead set against blight ordinances, but yeah, junkyard is a different animal. I don't want to see this construed as a blight ordinance.
Well, a blight ordinance is a very specific thing.
Yeah, I'm aware of what blight ordinances are. I just want to make sure that there is no cross-contamination, so to speak, of the words. Because I don't want to start telling people what they can do on their own property, as it has to be specified as a business, junkyard business.
Can I say something?
Well, Ray had his hand up, I think, and then you, and actually, I think Alvin had his hand up, but maybe he put it down. But Ray first, and then you, and then if Alvin does still have a comment, we'll go to Alvin.
All I wanted to say is instead of, I thought it'd be more like an auto recycler than a salvage yard, but it's really the same thing, splitting hairs.
Yeah, and either way, Ray, it wouldn't be captured in this definition or this discussion.
No.
Correct. Yeah.
So go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, so one of the turnoffs of this definition and placing it with a use in a district is the word itself, junkyard. Because what do people first think of when they think junkyard? They think of a mess. If you're going to place this use in, say, like you said, the business district, I know salvage people, you know, puts associate salvage with vehicles, with cars and stuff. So if you could say something like a recycling business, and then put a definition to recycling, and then put the requirements that they have to follow DEEP requirements, which I had presented some of them when we were working with Chris on Route 12. So I think the word junkyard just turns people off because they think of, oh my God, Thompson's going to turn into junkyards now because you're going to allow it. And I'll give you a perfect example. At the end of, I believe it was Morin Road off of Mountain Hill Road, he was in he was in the recycling business, and somebody told me about it. And within 2 months, the whole yard was cleaned up. He did realize that he could not bring his recycling material to his house like he was doing, and he was very cooperative. But if you put junkyard in there, and then if you start putting it in your use, you have to be very careful. A lot of thought has to go into it. And again, I don't know how everybody else feels about that definition, that word, of the connotation it has when you hear the word junkyard.
Well,
So-
I will just point out that this is directly from statute.
Right, I understand that.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand that. So, I think, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Have we looked at other, I have not had time to look at other communities, but we looked at other communities that have experience with this or have it in their regulations, and do we have time before the end of this?
I didn't, because the question that I was considering was essentially a simpler one, based at least in part on the assumption that I think you guys are likely to want to prohibit them in general. The only real question is, are you going to allow them in the BDD?
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Okay, so I like the term recycling yard. That would apply to the old metal, glass, paper, the rest of it. And salvage yard for the cars, the metal, the heavy duty stuff. Can we interact, put both of those? That clarifies it. Recycling yard is for your glass, your metal, all the stuff that you actually will be recycling. Whereas the salvage yard would be specifically designed, the definition would be for vehicles, trucks, old tractor trailers, stuff like that. That would make it a little bit simpler. In my mind, it clarifies it. It gets the word junkyard out of there because like I said, growing up when I did, junkyard was for cars. And of course, obviously it's changed over the decades. But I'm thinking that recycling yard, like Cindy suggested, would be good for that metal, glass, etc. And salvage yard would be the definition for a business that takes in, like Linehouse or Bob Marion. It would be classified as a salvage yard.
I can
So you have to
certainly
coordinate-
look into it.
Okay.
And you have to coordinate that with the definitions of the state statutes on
Correct.
recycling, salvage, junk.
Yeah.
Cindy, can you give me an example what the fellow on Mountain Road was recycling?
He was recycling anything from old homes. He was recycling anything from refrigerators, stoves, glass, metal, cans. It was just a whole
Menagerie.
menagerie of junk.
Thank you.
Because,
and recycling material. Yeah.
If I can interject there with what Cynthia just said, is that anybody that wants to recycle your computers and TVs and all of that stuff, that is a recycling business. But because of the components that are in there, the gold and there are some toxic material they consider that has to be done in a controlled environment.
Mm.
You just can't throw it into these little shredders and shred the thing up and come up with 100. You get plastic, you get all this stuff. So that would have to also be considered too, if somebody wanted to do that type of recycling, but the word has to be used as recycling. We need to, like Jane said, we need to take the word junkyard, throw it right out. That word does not exist anymore. The industry, everything has changed. You got recycling of, car parts, et cetera, computers, all that stuff is all recyclable. Glass is recyclable and everything, but glass is a little cleaner. Doesn't have what they call some toxic stuff to it. But I think it's the best way to go. Tara's got it, hit it pretty much. You too, Cindy. So we just need to I think, in all honesty, I grew up in the word, like she remembers junkyard. You used to go, I'm going to the junkyard to get a starter out of a Chevy or something. Well, they don't use that anymore. You got to go to a recycling yard or whatever now. So I think we need to stick with the terms that are being used today. In my opinion, I'm more in favor of that. So we can say, all right, in the RRAD, no, that's not allowed because of this, or this, or it's not allowed in the TVCC or whatever district, the main DMRD or whatever. So let's just try to focus on that, and I think we'll be able to come up with a good solution.
Let me just
So-
interrupt you, JBL, just to note that Ryan Canoyer entered the meeting at 7:26.
Okay, thank you.
And then let me just pose one question to the group we have tonight, and then we can decide if we want to talk about this more or move on, because we are going to have another meeting. Is the general feeling of the commissioners in attendance, regardless of what the definition itself may be moving forward, that this is a use they would like to universally prohibit or perhaps permit in limited districts? And I'll just toss out most likely the BDD, the Business Development District. And I'd like to go around the horn and just get an idea of that consensus for now. It's not a vote. It's just me polling the room for their general feelings.
Terry, you are correct. As long as you use the word consensus, it's not a vote or anything. You're just getting their opinion and what you feel is correct going forward.
Yeah, so let me call everybody out as I see them on my screen. Hold on, I have to move my participants bar sometimes. JBL, what's your feeling?
I'm for the get rid what you just said. I like that idea better.
Which is, I said two ideas: prohibit in general or allow in select districts.
Both. Prohibited in general and selective districts.
So perhaps permitted in selective districts.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Dan Bennett, you're next on my screen.
I permitted in certain districts,
Okay.
select districts.
Randy?
You gotta be explicit what the definitions are gonna be, and
Right, this is
I
just,
think it should be in specific districts.
okay. Alvin?
Ah. Oh, I'm always for definitions, but
Well, the definition is something I'm going to work on, right? To come up with, but we all know what use we are talking about. So how I go about looking into the way to change it could be influenced by whether or not this commission believes that this should be an allowable use at all.
I think you're gonna be able to have I think we'd be sticking our head in the sand if we didn't consider that you gotta get rid of this stuff somehow, and let's make it as legitimate and painless as we can.
And the other thing that you have to take into consideration is that, and for your record, Sarah, I am for in select districts. And to go back to what Randy just said, we don't want people dumping stuff all over the place. If there's specific places where this stuff can be done, that kind of takes care of that problem. I'm going to say 75% of it. There's still going to be people that dump, but in select districts and making sure that we've got that, like you said, go back to the definitions and everything else. But we have to have something in place so that we don't see things being dumped. And I mean, when the debacle came back up a few weeks back with the transfer station being shut down, people had already started dumping on some of the back roads. I don't want to see that get any worse.
All right, so I have, so Jane, you indicated your preference. Alvin, still actually waiting on what Alvin's preference is.
I'm sorry about that, Alvin.
That's okay.
My concern is what is gonna happen when we've got two of these junkyards, as it were, in town. When the owners die, are they gonna be allowed to continue their junkyard?
Well, I would say on the principle of being an existing non-conforming use, there's probably no choice there if the next owner of the property, and only the next owner of the property, chooses to continue the use.
That would be correct, Tara, again.
Yeah, because we can't predict what the future, is going to be with somebody if they die and what their family's going to do with it.
Well,
Okay. What you use the word somebody used the word non-conforming use. If you allow this, a person does it, it's a conforming use to the current regulations. And if a person dies and leaves it to their kids, it's a continuing use because it's a conforming use. There's
No,
nothing to do with
I think
non-conforming.
I think in the case that we're talking about, Cindy, the particular location is in the RRAD. So if the use were to be permitted in the BDD, but specifically prohibited in the RRAD, but the existing use, which is an existing non-conforming, were to be continued by the next owner, then that would be a continuing non-conforming use.
Okay, nothing was mentioned about districts. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Okay, so Alvin, I'm still waiting on your personal feelings here.
well, let Alvin continue. Move on to Ryan and whoever else you got.
Yeah, I've got Ray next and then Ryan.
Go ahead. It'll be easier.
Well, I think it should be in certain districts, but I also think that it should be in them districts, if it's in between where there are houses, there should be certain setbacks. And it should be special permit only, to be able to do that in that any of the districts.
An excellent point, Ray. Let me just drop that in the marginal notes here. Very good. Okay, Ryan?
Similar to the others, I would say certain districts, I would say, it should not be in, say, Thompson Common, Thompson Hill area. Probably not in a lot of the RRAD, but, the business development district is probably a good idea. That would make sense. So that's what I was thinking with that.
Okay, so Alvin, you are the last one, but again, not that we're voting. The
No, I
consensus
know
of
that.
those in the meeting does seem to be to consider allowing it in certain districts.
Well, I agree with that, but I agree more with Ray's opinion,
Okay, so
adding a specific setback.
Okay, so my task then for the
all right,
next
I have one
one.
more thing to say. I have one more thing to say.
Go ahead,
So-
Cindy.
Ray, you took my thunder away from me. So that was the next thing I was going to add. If you're going to do this, it needs to be a separate part of our regulations under Article 14. And you need to really put out strict compliance regulations that people have to comply with, and there has to be a special permit. And of course, and that's something that, you know, Tara and I can work on, is the compliance. I mean, they'll still have to follow Article 4, A, B, and C for a special permit. And then for this particular use, you would put in other conditions, other compliance regulations.
Okay, may I bring up something else too?
Go ahead.
And I don't see it happening, but maybe there should be a restriction as to how many would be allowed in our town.
It's possible that that can't be done, but let me add the note here.
You know, because I mean, I don't see an influx of 500 people that are going to come in and start a salvage yard or a recycling yard. But it's something that if we say that X amount are allowed for the town, then it takes that off the table completely and we don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I will look into that, Jane. Something in the back of my head says to me that unless it's specifically allowed in statutes, that you can't limit the type of businesses, the number of a specific business.
Type of business. No, I get that. I'm just thinking, you know, it's kind of like that we just, and of course we'll be discussing this later when we get down to the pot situation. We had discussed that too earlier when this first came up, limiting it to a certain amount based on the size of the town and the population of the town. So I'm just wondering if we can do that with this as well.
Well, and obviously we'll get to that when we discuss that specific topic. But when the legislation was the reason that was in our regulations is because when the adult use cannabis statutes were first adopted by the state, they included caps by population. Those caps have since been rescinded.
Okay.
So that was a case where there was a specific thing in statute that said they shall be limited according to these standards. The same thing I think can be true of liquor licenses, right?
Yes, it is the same thing with liquor licenses.
Right, but if there is no specific statutory authority to limit the number of a certain enterprise, whatever it happens to be, something in the back of my head is telling me, like, I think I've had this conversation with Rich Roberts before. I don't remember the topic, unfortunately.
Okay, so yeah.
But that can't be done, but I will look into it because that deserves an answer. Okay, so can we move on from junkyard for the moment?
Yep. Move on.
So then the other, and you'll notice that this is not in red because I do not have suggested language. This was a request from Cindy. And for similar reasons, this all had to do with Chris Grotch's application. Because that permit was awarded under the definition by saying that it fit the definition as currently constructive of commercial passive storage, which is currently as follows. A structure or facility used for the purpose of storing goods or equipment for a business. Passive storage does not include storage rental facilities or any other business aspect which is available to the general public. When we adopted that initially, it was for similar but different reasons, in that Cindy was getting some requests from property owners to just have a storage facility for their business, but there was no primary structure for it to be an accessory structure for. So this was the solution for that. But I think where the dumpster guy's application made everybody a little uncomfortable was that what he was proposing was a little more intensive than this definition may be captured. Now that got resolved because we referred to state regulations about transfer station, and it was determined that he couldn't do what he was proposing because it would have triggered the state regulations. But Cindy felt that this could be worked on. I do not have any specific ideas on how to amend this. So, and I see Cindy's got a hand raised, so we'll let her speak on it, and then anybody else who has notes to give, I will take your notes.
Okay, so an issue came up this week, believe it's 347 Riverside Drive, the location that the ZBA gave a used car dealership license to, and we approved it as a special permit, but nothing has happened on that property. Is owned by C Realty, and they are selling that property. And so someone called me the other day and said that they own a cement business. They wanted to buy that property to store, their business equipment in it and to park their trucks there when they're finished in the evening. So I went and looked what classification use on the table of uses can I give this person? And the only thing I came up with, and I don't have the book in front of me, but the only thing I came up with, businesses, business office space or something like that. I don't know if somebody has the book there and they can look in Thompson Corridor Development District. But that was the only thing I came up with. There was nothing there that said you have a business building to hold your materials and to park your vehicles when your day is finished. If somebody has a suggestion to me where else I can go in that table of uses, I welcome it. But what do you just classify them as a business? That's what they are.
Cindy, do you not think that what you just described fits this definition? A structure or facility used for the purpose of storing goods or equipment for a business?
Correct.
So this is the new part that you put in.
This is exactly as it is now.
So you're saying storage commercial passive.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
That verse that's as compared to the bakery where they're storing stuff, and getting paid to store your stuff.
Correct. With superior storage, the actual business is rental to the public for storage.
Yep.
Right.
So the purpose of this, and I think the reason we came up with it was that Cindy was struggling with the fact that people wanted to build these storage facilities, which if it was on your otherwise business property, or if you had a home-occ or a neighborhood limited enterprise and you just needed an extra building, it would be an accessory structure. I think she was, as I recall, she was struggling with it because it was a primary structure for which we didn't have a definition she felt satisfied what they were asking to do. It is a business use. It serves a business.
Right.
But it is not a
Private business.
it's
and
not a
open to the public.
forward-facing public business.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
That you know what? That's the word. That's the word that's not around in some of these table of uses. Okay, now I see what you're saying. Okay. So if I tell these people to apply under storage commercial passive,
If all they're doing is storing their stuff there, then
Yeah.
that's
But they
exactly
haven't-
what that is.
well, they're gonna have their office there too. They're gonna have their business office there in the building.
Well,
Okay, so then I would say it's not passive commercial storage if
Well,
their actual office is gonna be there. So
Yeah,
then,
their
yes,
office
you
is
and I
gonna
can
be there.
discuss what category that might
Yeah.
best fit in. So
Well,
now,
I put it under the business.
okay, well,
line,
that's fine.
yeah.
So now we're back to the original question, which is, do we feel as a group that this definition is sufficient? Or is it too broad? Or is there some other thing about it that I don't know, might lead to an unintended consequence? Because that's why it's in here. It's not because I have particular ideas for it. It's
well,
because Cindy and I we're both concerned with the dumpster guy application. That was resolved through other means, but is there some other thing about this definition that could lead to an unintended consequence?
Let me ask this question to the both of you. The people want to buy the property, the building is there, it is commercial. They want to, store their equipment, whatever it is, and they're in their trucks and everything on the outside, which to me is okay. And if they are going to put in a small office, which would make sense, and if there is already space in there that was used for like an office space or whatever, Cindy, it should be allowed for them because, otherwise they gotta, use another place for an office. They're trying to consolidate. In my mind, what I'm thinking of is they want to put everything under one roof, which it's a commercial building for business.
So would you want to add the word, the phrase, in office, business office space?
Yeah, yes.
Would you want to add that into it?
Well,
Yeah,
I
I was
think
just thinking something very similar, so let's
Yeah.
try this.
Yeah,
this way it's all under that one little storage
right.
passive, but we need those words in there so it covers it all in one shot. So again, that we're not
Yep.
limiting to them, but we're giving them the opportunity. This is what they want to do. We're trying to accommodate them. That's what it is.
I
Well-
agree with John, and you also should consider too, because you're talking about Superior Storage. They have an office in that building as well for
Yeah.
commercial
But
space.
that's an entirely different thing.
They're
That-
open to the public.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, forward facing businesses.
Yeah,
But
sorry,
but
yeah.
let's face reality. Most businesses in this town are not forward facing businesses. Most people have, their work trucks or whatnot. There's a lot of businesses in town that aren't like a retail store or having necessarily access for the public.
Correct.
right.
It's a very, but most places are not like that.
So
So-
I added this sentence, so I'll read the whole thing, and you guys tell me if you think this resolves the issue, or if you think it needs more work.
Yeah.
Storage commercial passive, a
Perfect.
structure or facility used for the purpose of storing goods or equipment for a business. Passive storage does not include storage rental facilities or any other business aspect which is available to the general public. A commercial passive storage facility may include an office if that office is not open to the general public.
So
Or
what is wrong with that is that if you have an office there and you have a big sign up saying cement, whatever, with whatever that cement company does at an individual home, then the general public would not be able to walk in there and say, gee, what is it that you do? And can you do this for me? So if you say it's not open to the general public, because it actually is a business.
Right, so I see what you're saying. I guess what I'm saying is that a facility for a business where it is a storage facility and they just happen to have a little office there so they can do some paperwork while they're watching their trucks, is a different thing than a business with an office where the public is permitted to walk in. And I would say that that falls under professional offices, even if the profession is somebody who's a journeyman carpenter or a cement contractor, that it's just a business office. And I don't care what business they're doing if all it is an office and their stuff happens to be there.
Okay, so how picky are you gonna be? If somebody wants a building and a phone on the wall, are you gonna call out a business? I mean, an office?
Well, this person indicated that, she would be conducting her business in that office. As far as, the aspect
As
of
long
running a
as she's not
business.
renting out office space, I wouldn't be concerned about it.
Mm.
I see Dan's hand up and then Ray.
I was just gonna ask you to ask Dan, because, go ahead.
I'm just curious if it's a little too vague. I want to say, first of all, I'm pro-business, so I'm not trying to stop people from having business by any means, but if they have a storage building and then they have an office in there, they could potentially be like running an import business, right? There could be trucks coming in and out, dropping off stuff, shipping it back out, and the whole business is in that building. They have the office and they have the area to store everything.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Dan. So my response to that would be that we do describe warehousing as a use, and I think that warehousing would fit what you're describing.
Okay.
So, you know, and again, the original reason we added this was to solve a problem that Cindy got more than once, right? She had more than one applicant who just wanted to have a commercial building, and that was the only thing there, and the only thing it was doing was storing their stuff. And at the time, Cindy was not comfortable with any of the uses described as fitting that being an allowable use. So that was where this was generated. Ray, I see you're next.
Well, I would say, you know, for a company like this, the way that is written should be all right, and you put it underneath this permit. But, you know, down the road, they open up and they decide they want to sell bags of concrete or blocks like Santerre used to do. You just tell them, you know, that they have to come in and change their permit use.
Good point, Ray.
Good point, good point.
And that
That's a
could
good
be-
one. That's a good one. That would solve it right there, that if they're gonna change the use, they have to come in and get a different permit.
And that could be in the list of your compliance. You
Yes,
could put that in
Yeah,
the list of
yep.
compliance.
Yeah, that is an excellent point, and perhaps something we should keep in mind more often, that, you know, a permit is a permit, but it doesn't mean that things are frozen in amber, right? People can amend their permits later, upgrade them to the next level of review, kind of like what you guys were just discussing with the home occupation that potentially moves to the neighborhood limited enterprise, right? There's a point up to which you can scale up, and then there may be a point at which they've exceeded the capacity of the particular property or the particular district. And then it would be the commission's discretion to say, you know what, no, we can't give you a permit for this expansion, but that doesn't mean you can't do it somewhere else in town.
Well, the expansion, if the land itself is big enough for an expansion, so they don't have to go someplace else, that I would say would be a special permit to come in and you know, so we could look it over and see, well, how big of an expansion that they want to do on that property, Tara.
Or you can say they can amend their current
Yes,
special
either
permit.
or, but
Yeah.
we can't say to them, yo, you gotta go down the street, because if it's allowable to expand, say, X amount of feet, then it, you know, for them, it would be cheaper to do that, to expand the building. You know, they're the ones that gotta pay the property tax, they gotta pay all of it. But if we put the verbiage in and you know, and then we can go from there. We have to think of it could happen 5 years from now or 10 years from now. We can't see that, but we should anticipate that could happen, that their business is gonna expand one way or the other. You know what I mean? We got a couple people that got their own business and everything, and over time it has expanded, you know? So, you know, that's something we have to kind of keep in the back of our head, but it's nice to have that option to say to them, no, yes, you can expand, but this is the amount you can expand to, depending on the size of the property and of the building, you know, so we keep the offsets, so to speak. Am I somewhere on the line right there?
Yep.
Cynthia?
Yeah, I think you're all right there. Ray, I see your hand up.
Cindy, did they say anything about truck repair there for repairing their own vehicles?
I do not believe they did.
Okay, just wondering, because I know there's a big garage door there. I've been in that building many a times when Santerre used to bought a lot of cement blocks from them over the years. But you know, there is a lot of room in there if they, you know, decided to, you know, come in, if we tell them to just go with this the way it's written right now, and then, you know, if you decide that you want to sell stuff, because they do have plenty of room for storage there. But I was just wondering, because with the big garage door, if they're, you know, if they're going to be storing trucks there, if they say anything about repairing their own vehicles there.
Okay.
You can't stop them from repairing their own vehicle, Ray, but the
No,
thing is,
you can't stop them from repairing, but then you know, then you get into hazardous waste with oil and all
Right.
that, and that's
Well-
not in with this permit.
I agree with you, but the thing is, then that changes the whole aspect. If you find, you know, if they're gonna be doing this and that with storage of, say, waste oil and stuff like that, well, guess what? That's when Cynthia comes in and she, you know, she has to do her job. You know what I mean? If it comes to that, but you know, if they gotta fix something and they have to fix it overnight, or they got to go wait for the parts in 2 days, they can fix it themselves. They got the tools. It's like anything else, you know, but let's just keep it to what they want to run their business out of there, store their trucks there, you know, put that little office in, and then we must think about if they decide they want to expand that building, which I believe there is enough room, but we must be ready for that, you know. Let's don't wait till 5-10 years from now. So if we got it implemented now, then it's easier down the road for us to decide yes, no, or indifferent. That's how I'm looking at it. But
Okay,
you are correct. You are correct, Ray.
so can I have us go around the horn again? And the question is, do we keep it as currently in the regulations? Or is your preference to add the third sentence referring to the ability to hold an office? To also have an office, and I'll just go around again in the order that I see you. JBL?
Add the sentence, and that will cover the whole thing, you know, gives them the opportunity to have because I think there is an office in there, I believe, I could be wrong.
Yeah,
But
there is.
Okay, so they're not adding an office, they're just gonna take that section and use it for their business, as long as it
Mhm.
stays within their business and it's not open to the public or whatever, that's perfectly, I'd say leave that third sentence in.
Okay, very good. Next on my list is Dan Bennett,
Yeah, I would say leave that in.
the new sentence.
Yes.
Yeah, Randy?
As long as the office is for their use,
Correct.
there's no problem with it. If they start renting out office space to Tom, Dick, and Harry, then that's a different story.
Agreed. Alvin?
I like the added commercial passive storage facility.
Okay.
Yep.
Next I see Ray,
I would keep it, I would leave that in there too.
the new sentence.
Correct.
Yeah. Ryan?
Yep, leave it in there. I like the idea to have an office. Everybody should have an office.
Okay. Jane, are you still here? It looks like you dropped out.
No, I'm still
Oh,
here.
there you are. There you
Yeah,
are.
I'm still here. No, ditto.
Okay.
She was
All right.
always a dropout.
Nah.
Is to add the new.
We're missing one person?
No, for some reason I didn't see Jane before, but I see her now, so
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
I'm invisible, Tara. I have that power.
Okay, the next one, Dan, go ahead.
I just want to ask, so just so I understand how this works, we will create these new regulations over the course of several meetings here, and then how do they get adapted? They have to go to a town vote?
That isn't, no, the general public never votes on regulations.
Okay,
But the regulations are maintained by the either a zoning commission if you have separate planning and zoning, or in the case of a combined commission such as we have here, the planning and zoning commission. What is required is to hold a public hearing. So a public hearing is like the other day when they accepted the application for Rivermill for a public hearing in October. That's a 2-month process because the public hearing requires notice to the public of the date of the meeting so that people can come and voice their opinions. But that's the role of the public in its entirety in a public hearing, is they have the opportunity to speak and be heard by the members of the commission. Now, in the case of an application, the commission is obliged to approve a legal application, but sometimes they can modify an application based on public input as long as that modification is legal. In the case of the regulations, it's a little fuzzier because you are approving text. You can approve or deny, and you may consider the input of the public, again, as long as they're not asking you for something grossly illegal or illegal at all. And you can, to a certain extent, amend them on the fly, but that gets a little trickier. So the regulatory process is owned by the Planning and Zoning Commission, and you have a lot of discretion, not unlimited discretion. You're still tied to state statutes and sometimes other types of things. But you do have your greatest discretionary power as a commission is actually in creating the regulations. Once they are created, the obligation is that you approve applications which conform to the regulations that you've approved. Make sense?
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Okay, this one should be fairly easy, and then we can spend at least some time on cannabis, which is the reason we all came here tonight. In chapter 14 or section 14.3, earth, sand, and gravel extraction and removal. Under B, exemptions, you've made some amendments to this in the past couple years, but and again, this rose out of specific case studies. Under B, exemptions, the following uses are exempt from the provisions of this section as a requirement to obtain a permit. Right now, there are 3 described exemptions. Number 1 and 2 are fine. Number 3, and this is something that Cindy, Meg, and both of the chairs, both Wetlands and Planning and Zoning, have discussed at some length. The suggestion is to remove the 3rd exemption for excavation, removal, filling, or grading of a total amount up to 1,500 cubic yards. Now, I'll give you guys some context because some of you know how we got to this point, to the point where we're at now, and some of you don't. So a few years ago, when we did the overhaul, it used to be that the level to which you could excavate just in general without having to come for a permit was 3,000 cubic yards. We had a fairly contentious graveling application out, actually not too far from the train wreck park site. It was very, very contentious. And at that time, we reduced the no permit threshold by half to 1,500 cubic yards as kind of a compromise. Some people who actually wanted us to eliminate it at that time. Fast forward to this year, there is at least one, and I actually think there's more than one property owner or operator on a property who has excavated within that threshold, but there were some problems that were inadvertently created for wetlands. So there was nothing to trigger the ZEO to go and examine this operation until that 1,500 cubic yard threshold is hit. But there are potential problems for wetlands, even with a very small amount of excavation, if it's just an as of right use. So what the 5 of us agreed the zoning enforcement officer, the wetlands agent, chair of IWC, chair of P&Z, and myself, was that we would suggest just striking that as of right level, because you're covered if you have a plan for something, right? If you have an approved building plan, whether it's for a structure or a subdivision or whatever, then whatever extraction you're doing there would be covered by that permit. So you shouldn't need to come for that. And if you're extracting according to an agricultural use, there's all kinds of essentially freebies that they give to farms. And we're not going to deviate from that because we are a farm-friendly community. But I thought that the rationale that even a well-meaning operator could cause an indelible harm to a wetland because there was nothing to prompt them to come seek any permitting, I thought that was a compelling logic. And so here it is for your consideration and discussion.
All right.
Can I go first on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, so I'm reading, so number one under the exemptions, unless exporting of more than, okay, all right. I know that we discussed this, and I'm not too sure how much in favor I was of eliminating that 1,500, as of right 1,500. I don't know how that would work in continuing to allow the 1,500 with wetlands, but to me, it just seems extreme to eliminate it, because you went from 3,000 to 1,500, and now you're going to 0. It's people's property, and if they're only clearing 750 yards, why are we making them go and get a special permit for 750 cubic yards? So
Well,
I don't know.
so that's actually an excellent point, Cindy. Maybe it isn't a special permit. Maybe for
yeah.
up to 1,500 cubic yards, it's
But
an administrative
review.
permit, meaning they just have to come talk to you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I like that. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
I'm gonna drop that in a note, and then I see Ray's hand up. Let me just
Okay.
get to my note here.
When you get done with all the other people with hands up to, I would like to speak.
Go ahead, Ray. I can listen and talk at the same and type at the same time.
Well, I was just gonna say, instead of doing something with a permit, how about just a site walk?
Well, you could do a zoning permit, which is basically the same thing, but at least it's permitted, and the way our permalink system is set up, the zoning permit goes to the wetlands agent it's called tasking. And then that's when the wetlands gets involved in it, and she doesn't sign off on that tasking until the wetlands, if there is wetlands on the property, is resolved. So if you don't want to go to a site plan review, you can start with up to 1,500 square feet with a zoning permit. Yes.
Well, I would think, it's 700, like you were saying, 750 yards. If somebody, is cleaning out up close to the wetlands and 750 yards, they're not, if they just had somebody come and look at it, they're not being forced to pay for a permit.
But they won't know to do that.
Yeah,
People
it is a little bit difficult, Ray, to write in, like, you have to do something, but it isn't a permit. Like, what is that legal process then? Like, a permit at least is something that demonstrates, I have this certificate, which is a permit that the zoning enforcement officer signed off on to acknowledge that I am operating within fair boundaries. Right, because one of the purposes of regulations always, it's not just to regulate for its own sake, it's to protect both the user and, in this case, the landscape, as opposed to another person.
And because of our permanent leak system, you know, the way that people have to apply for permits, I cannot sign off on a zoning permit until the wetlands agent approves that zoning permit for the issue of wetlands.
Okay, the reason why I said that was that just somebody should be there looking at it for the wetlands before anybody even cuts a stick is the way I was looking at it.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't think that's gonna happen.
Wetlands isn't my area. What I know about wetlands regulations is that they are even more guided by statute than zoning regulations.
Yeah,
Like
they are.
Like statutes definitely govern zoning regulations, but within the statutes, you guys have wide discretion to do things like approve different kinds of uses or different levels of setbacks, blah, 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 blah. Wetlands is very
State
uniform.
controlled.
There's very, very little discretion. So I have to assume, and again, it's not totally my area, but I have to assume that part of the reason that the wetlands agent and commission are so frustrated is they feel that they can't just enter, that they don't have, I don't know how to phrase this, other than to say, if they're feeling constrained by what they're allowed to do with their regulations, I have to assume that that's a serious concern and constraint, because if they could just write their own regulation to resolve the problem, they would have by now. But it's causing friction between zoning and wetlands that this allowance is here in the way it's here. I think an administrative permit, meaning a ZEO permit, is not a bad thing to consider. And that's something I can take back to the wetlands agent and the two chairs and Cindy, and we can discuss and say, do we think this will prevent future problems from occurring? That's what we're trying to future-proof the process.
So to put my 2 cents in here after that, in relationship to the wetlands, when people come to me, even though I don't process any wetlands applications, and I will check the map to see if there's wetlands. But my comment to them and on my instruction sheet for applying for permits is contact the wetlands agent, contact Northeast District Department of Health. And again, I have to emphasize, I cannot sign off on any zoning permit until she signs off. Now, that's not a statute. The statute is we can't sign off on site plan review, special permit, and subdivision until they approve it. This is just within internally in our system, and that's how it works. And I feel that's good, that she has to review all the zoning permits, that department has to review the zoning permits. So that's why I say, you know, I'm pushing for the zoning permit on under.
Oh,
15.
now I understand why you were referencing permit link, because the permit link system creates the prompt. Okay, now your comment makes more sense to me. Ray, I see your hand up.
Well, I think you five ought to have a conversation to keep everybody, you know, everybody on the same page and transparency between, you know, the planning and zoning, the ZEO, and wetlands before we go any further on this here.
Hey,
Just
Tara?
my opinion on that.
Yep, I will
Tara?
take this suggestion back to staff.
Tara?
Yes, go ahead.
Just to reference that point there, I've worked in this. What used to be done when I worked on property land where there was wetland before any material was removed, what was done is that the owner of the property and the company that was going in to remove that material, whatever the material was, ledge, gravel, or whatever, they had to have the area marked off where they feel the wetland started. And then the area that was going to be removed, which I've worked on quite a few of them, that section had to be, if it was higher than where the wetlands is, they only allowed you to take that material from that height down even with the wetlands. Because if you go beyond that, now you're gonna end up creating like a little pool or whatever you're gonna do. Well, where does water go? To the lowest point. So in my suggestion to this is that before Cynthia does the permalink, all that the property owner and whoever's gonna removing better know exactly from the wetlands. This, I think, will eliminate the wetlands problem with us and vice versa, is that get together, find out where this wetland starts or ends, and then that area that's gonna be removed is okay up to that point. That's the only way you're gonna really eliminate it, because you need a surveyor in to make sure it's right to the point, and that will eliminate all this back and forth that, oh, you're intruding into wetlands, you did this wrong. If they marked it out with stakes, they can't go beyond. I think they allow you within 15, 20 feet of a wetlands area. It could be, 20 feet or whatever. That's as long as it ain't no less than ground level, even with the wetlands. That's how it usually works. If you're gonna go deeper than that, that changes the whole course. Now you're involved in DEP and all that other stuff. NDDH has nothing to do with it. All they take care of is the other stuff. But that would end up being DEP, because now you're creating a what we call like a quarry hole. And that involves a lot more paperwork and everything else. That's my suggestion from my experience working in the industry.
Ray, I saw you had your hand up next.
Yes, I was reading what you had for notes on the side. What I wanted was the wetlands to not to have Cindy look at the wetlands first, to have the wetlands
right
before the 1500 was pulled out. The wetlands goes in there, just like what John just said, and marks off what can be taken out. Where is the wetland start? That's what I meant by what I said.
Okay.
I might have said it a little different. But
yeah, thank you, Ray. 'Cause I did think you meant Cindy. Okay. For the purposes of tonight, can we put a pin in this? I'll take that suggestion of maybe switching it to an administrative permit from the ZEO back to staff and the chairs, and then we can touch on that at the next meeting. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, because I want to give at least some decent amount of time to get the microcultivator thing started.
Let's get on the big bad boy.
All right. Okay, you all know why we're here with this one.
Tara, is that okay with all the rest of you commissioners?
All
It's a
right.
yes or no.
Maybe. Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so you know that this is the big issue between now and when we finish this process. You know why we're here. You know why this landed on moratorium. So when I went and just participant screen, when I went back and looked at the existing, I essentially made what I felt were the minimum changes that might get you to where you're happy. But it's just that they were minimum changes. We can talk about anything you want, including totally preventing it, being, more liberal with it, less liberal, whatever you want. This is just a starting off point. So I'm just going to read everything in the entire section to include the suggested new text, and then we can discuss. So 14.7, retail alcohol and adult use cannabis, C, adult use cannabis. 1, cannabis product, paraphernalia, and cannabis establishment shall be defined according to CGS 21A-420 definitions added by Public Act 21-1. 2, of the types of establishments defined in CGS 21A-420 and these regulations, cultivator is not a permitted use in any district of the town. 3, no cannabis establishment shall be permitted within 1,000 feet of any public or private school, library, or daycare center. In determining compliance with this provision, the controlling distance shall be the shortest distance between the door of the proposed outlet and those lot lines of the affected facility. And to be clear, the changes suggested here were to strike the word non-medical and just make it any cannabis establishment. And then facility or micro cultivator, you don't need that because it's just no cannabis establishment. 4, all adult use cannabis establishment types as defined in CGS 21A 420, except cultivators, shall be allowed by special permit in the Business Development District, Thompson Corridor Development District, and Downtown Mill Rehabilitation District. 5, oh, this is new. I should have highlighted that in red. Micro cultivators in the Downtown Mill Rehabilitation District may only be proposed as indoor grow facilities where no part of the cultivation activity shall occur outdoors. 6, micro cultivators that do not engage in direct retail sales or home deliveries shall be allowed by special permit in the RRAD. Micro cultivator is the only type of adult use cannabis establishment that shall be permitted in the RRAD. And that last sentence is new. 7, and this is new. The minimum lot size for a micro cultivator in the RRAD shall be 200,000 square feet. 8, also new. The site plan for any adult use cannabis establishment shall demonstrate to the commission that it complies with all dimensional and physical requirements set forth in CGS 21A-420 as amended. 9, as a condition of a special permit for an adult use cannabis establishment, the commission may require, and this is unchanged, but except for the numbering, may require the screening of the uses permitted herein from adjacent residential, institutional, religious, or public uses, and may prohibit access to a public thoroughfare containing such protected uses where a safer means of access is available. The commission may also set conditions regarding parking or traffic control methods. 10, public smoking or vaping of cannabis products is prohibited at food and beverage service establishments, including outdoor seating areas. And that's it. So the base changes are, or the base suggested changes are to clarify that cultivator, meaning anything larger than a micro cultivator, is specifically not permitted. It suggests that those 3 essentially mixed use or commercial districts are places where you can propose any of the allowed cannabis uses. But if it's in the mill district, it can be only indoors. And then I suggested a threshold for the minimum size of a lot for a micro cultivator in the RRAD. I kind of not entirely randomly plucked 200,000 square feet out of the air, but I think that's like our highest
Minimum.
Our highest level for as of right agriculture livestock. So it was like semi-random, but not totally random.
Hey, Tara, I think that's the one that needs the most work, number 7. I don't think that's nearly enough space.
That may be, Ryan. Like I say, it was just a starting point.
I mean, that it's not even within the realm of where I'm going, though. It's wouldn't be considered statistically significant. I think it's got to be a lot more acreage given what we faced with the Hill Road, Chase Road debacle. So one of the suggestions that I had considered and given a lot of thought to was I think that the acreage would have to be much greater to not disrupt in, particularly in RRAD and in the general areas that we're talking about. And by the way, I do like your suggestion for the downtown area where indoor cultivators and stuff. I think that's a good suggestion, but the other one is a bad suggestion. And I would say the minimum, and I'm going to throw my numbers out and you guys can pick that apart, but I think the minimum should be, you should own about 50 acres or so and maybe only be able to use about 10% of it for micro cultivator or something within that realm. But it should be a very big plot of land where you're not going to be as disruptive to your neighbors. If you only own 1 or 2 acres or something like that, or 3 or whatever, you should not be doing cannabis, period. That's the way I think about it. In terms
And
of growing.
I'm in agreement with that, for the same reasons that Ryan just suggested. That number should be a lot bigger.
Well, that's exactly why we're here discussing. I will say, Ryan, about your suggestion, I mean, 50 acres, the acreage itself, you guys can discuss and land on whatever you like. In terms of the percentage of the property, since micro cultivators are actually capped in square footage anyway, I don't think you need that piece. Because if you're in 50 acres, the maximum size of a micro cultivator facility is already going to be less than whatever, 5%.
Yeah, you're
10%.
right. And it probably comes down to a bit of a math exercise too, right? To think about what that would be. But I wanted to go with a higher number and then consider, not. So I guess what I was trying to avoid in my scenario was someone coming in and buying a big lot of land and their sole purpose is just to grow cannabis, maybe not live there. It's just buying a big field and saying, we're gonna go for it and do, I don't know, however many acres, 20 acres of cannabis, in some old cornfield or something like that. But what I'm thinking in the back of my mind, and this is something I'd love to hear everyone else's opinion on, particularly Randy probably as well, since he's one of the larger landowners, is I'm thinking in the future. And I'm thinking, what does this look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? And are any of these farms going to need that option at some point where, maybe other businesses are doing really well or some aren't doing well, and you may have some tough decisions. And is that something that someone would want to consider that has a big piece of property? And I don't want to take that away from the farmers. So I think we touched on it too in the Ag Commission, but that was something that I had brought up, and I felt like we had some consensus generally on that part of it. And I'd love to hear what everybody else says, and I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I think Ray had a hand up a minute ago. Maybe he
Yeah,
could.
my hand's up. I agree with that because the 200,000 is only 5 acres, and for all of the information that was brought to us before, and know about it for years anyway, but the smell of that a field that's big enough for somebody to be making money off of, they're going to smell that miles away. So, if there's 50 acres, there should be, we should have to have setbacks where it has to be like in the middle of that 50 acres so that, houses to all the sides, back, front, to the sides, all are, plenty far enough that it's not going in people's little kids' bedrooms and stuff. And, I know what that guy was saying, not to beat up the guy that was talking that time, but that guy, I think I forgot more about growing that stuff than that guy knew. But it's definitely what Ryan's saying is correct. It should definitely be about that size of a lot, in my opinion. And I think it should be also, like he said, for not somebody to come in and cut down, 40 acres of trees, but more for the farmers that we already have in town. If they, if something happened with taxes and something, and they had to go to a crop like that to keep the farms in their name, so that they wouldn't have to get rid of them. That's my opinion on that.
Okay, so before Alvin, I just want to respond to a couple of the things that you've said, and your suggestions are all totally valid. I have some concerns with using the issue of odor when members of this commission have been very vocal about odors related to livestock as being a part and parcel of agriculture, which they are. Now, we all know, and I acknowledge that cannabis cultivation is not covered, let's call it by capital A agriculture, right? It doesn't come under the statutes in the same way. But I think we can also all agree that it is small a agriculture, which is why you're referencing farmers. It doesn't happen to get the same protections, but it is kind of the same kind of thing. So if cow manure, pig manure, fertilizer smells, and fertilizer smells, I would say, are worse than any of them. But you know, if we are saying, be aware that you live in an agricultural community and things might smell, I think it's a little problematic to say, oh, except for this smell.
But there's a difference because them other things were already there before other people moved in. That there's a difference between.
You know,
a
I
cow
take
or a
your
pig smell.
point, Ray. I do take your point. I'm just saying that I have concerns about it. I'm not saying
Yeah,
that
but
it's
there is
valid
a
or
difference.
invalid.
There's a difference between something that's already there or something that new that you're bringing in. That's my opinion on that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. And I'm not trying to suggest that your opinion is invalid. I'm just saying that I have concerns. The other concern that I have, based on what you expressed, is the idea that perhaps we're only thinking about existing farmers within the town wanting to offset future costs, which, by the way, I think they should be allowed to do. What gives me a little concern, and I actually don't know if Ray said it or Ryan said it, was, well, what if somebody wants to come in and buy a 50-acre parcel? And well, that in fact gets right to, if you're a private property owner, this commission is very much on record of saying you should be able to do what you want with your property as long as it fits the standard. So if the standard is somebody can have a 50-acre parcel, and in that parcel, within whatever dimensional levels you set, they're going to knock down some trees to put a micro cultivator facility, that then becomes their right, whether they're an existing farmer or a new entrepreneur. And I only bring this up because I don't want you guys to have the appearance of favoritism for one group over another. And maybe that's not the way you meant it, Ryan. But that is the way it could be interpreted by someone.
It's not intended to favor a group. It's intended to not have the level of conflict that we had prior, and to respond to what the citizens clearly told us that they cared about, while also allowing it. And the other thing that, you know, back to your point about the indoor facilities, we should have a different probably set of regulations for the indoor versus the outdoor, because there's indoor facilities that are, you know, in very, very highly populated areas in Massachusetts. I can think of some, you know, I know a lot of places, but there's one right in Webster, you know, right behind Price Chopper. I mean, it's not,
Right.
you know, it's not taking over the whole place. So indoor versus outdoor is a massive difference in terms of a lot of the concerns that were raised, not just smell, but that being one of them. And let's face it, that odor is it is pretty strong. And the other part of it too is, and this isn't for today, but we should also be a little bit more specific in terms of where the regs are, because hemp versus cannabis is also very different, and a lot of people confuse the two and don't distinguish between the two. And just for the benefit of my knowledge to pass on to the commission, I know of for a fact that there is a class action lawsuit against the state of Connecticut because the regulations in this 420 bill are, you know, very rough on the hemp industry versus, you know, relative to the cannabis industry. So there's a pretty significant class action lawsuit. I'll try to dig up an article on it and talk about it. I have nothing to do with it, but I'm aware of it, that it exists. So we should be aware that it exists as well.
I would be interested in reading that.
Yeah, so would I.
Ryan, before I get to Alvin and Jane, I just want to clarify one point, because Ryan, you and I have discussed this before anyway. Hemp is covered by capital A agriculture, right? That's a right to farm product.
Yes. it is.
So in terms of the regulations, unless you just want to include a simple phrase in there saying hemp and cannabis are not equivalent and not treated the same, which is fine.
Yeah,
And
I just want it to be clarified for people if someone in the town was reading through it, and hopefully we can be a little bit, more specific to show that we've given a lot of thought to the subject.
Right. And then as to your other comment about, setting different dimensional standards, whatever, for indoor versus outdoor, that new number 8 that I have there is exactly in response to, I think, concerns that both you and Ray previously, which is, that the state changes their guidelines. So one way that you can always be in compliance with whatever the state is doing is to reference the statute as amended, and then you are covered. Because if the state changes their dimensional requirements and you haven't changed yours, now you're in disparity.
That's a fair point. And just for the record too, I count 3 times since the regulations have been in place that the state has made some type of amendments to those. Not saying that they're going to do it in the future, but they have. So that's a good point.
So Alvin's next, then Jane.
Yes, thank you. I got a different opinion on 7 and 8, different way to write it, compose it. In other words, for 7, I would state the minimum size for a multi-cultivator site in the RAD shall be 200 square feet, in parentheses, 4.59 acres.
Oh, I see what you're saying. But what your colleagues are saying is that they'd like to see the level set higher. But what you're essentially saying is you'd like to see it expressed in square feet and acres.
Correct.
Okay.
In other words, not the minimum lot size. They're not talking about cannabis. They're just talking about the lot.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the size, the minimum size for a multi-cultivator site in the RAD shall be 200,000 square feet, in parentheses, 4.59 acres.
Gotcha.
And then 8, the site plan for an adult use cannabis establishment shall demonstrate via a site plan to the commission that it complies with all dimensional and physical requirements set forth in statute as amended. Those would be my suggestions.
Got it. Okay, Jane, you're up.
Well, they all pretty much said what I was going to say. I absolutely agree that the 200,000 square feet is not big enough. And to go back to what Ryan said, I don't believe that's going to cause problems. I can see it now. It is going to cause problems. So we need to think long and hard on that one. The other one, Tara, going back up to 1 or 2, 1,000 square feet from schools and or, public or private schools, libraries, daycare center. I would actually like to see the 1,000 the 1,000 feet up to at least 1,500 feet. So that the parents of any of the children in town are not going to get upset over it. I would like to see that change to 1,500, actually 2,000 feet, so that would eliminate that problem that will come back and bite us.
Okay.
And, I know that the center behind Price Chopper, I know what you were saying, Tara. Yes, we can't say that, pig smell is acceptable, but pot smell is not acceptable. I get what you're saying, but there are still people that have many misconceptions about cannabis and or hemp, they're two different animals. I can honestly tell you, I have nothing, you guys know it. I have nothing against pot or the facilities or anything, but I certainly would not want it in my backyard. Because I know that is going to cause problems. So upping that 200,000 feet, go even higher with that. And I believe we also talked when we discussed this before that we were actually looking at the idea of not allowing outdoor growth, that it would have to be indoor growth. I believe we discussed that, I don't know what, 6 months ago, whatever it was. That is something that I would still like to see. It puts more of, go ahead, have your pot growing, everything else, but it has to be contained.
I mean, that is definitely an option that you guys can consider. We haven't talked about that yet. And I will say, I don't think we're going to resolve this tonight, not to mention there's people not here who definitely want to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah, that's just my suggestion, because I do remember we talked about it. And that would alleviate some of the problem, not all of them, but it would alleviate some of the concerns of the citizens if it's indoor growing, but it still has to have so many feet away from, you're not going to put a building up in a neighborhood and then grow pot in it. So we've got a long way to go on this one.
Tara?
Well, I saw Alvin and then Ray and then you, I think, but Alvin looks like he might have stepped away. So Ray, why don't you go, then JBL and then Alvin?
Go ahead, John. I'll wait till after you.
All right. My point of view, my feeling is I have nothing against cultivation of marijuana or hemp in a building, because it's a controlled environment. Me personally, I like to see number 7 taken right out of this. Nowhere in RRAD. If somebody wants to buy 20 acres or 30 acres and wants to put a building up and grow hemp or cannabis, long as it's in a controlled environment. The state, what they're doing now, and every time you turn around, you blink, they're changing it. So if we just kind of stick to, all right, it can be done, grown inside a building. We come in with a, for a special permit, site plan, all that stuff to see if it'll work in that district. I mean, we got some buildings that probably would be okay for it. But if somebody, and let the homeowners grow their own pot, they're allowed so many pots to grow, plants to grow. That I'm good with that. But you know what? Let's just take the micro cultivators and all of them from outside growth right off the table. That's my opinion.
Okay, so just to be clear.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, just to be clear, that you guys can certainly also choose that. If you choose that, the suggestion that Ryan made, which was based on sort of giving future options to existing farmers to diversify, that now becomes not an option.
Well,
right? Because your farms are in the RRAD. That's where they are.
I understand that. I'm talking somebody new buying X amount of acreage and trying to do it. Now, a farmer, if they got 50 acres, 100 acres, and like Ryan said, they need to diversify into something else to maintain their property, to keep it within the family, then that would be a grandfather clause, as far as I'm concerned.
Except that it wouldn't be a grandfather clause. And that's where I was saying I have concerns about, right? And it's not like I think you're a bad person for saying it, but I have concerns about creating different sets of rules for different people. So if an existing farmer with a plot of land of whatever size you determine is the correct threshold can do it, you can't prevent a new person from buying a plot of land of that size to do a legal activity, right? It's a legal activity. So if the threat, and remember that your jurisdiction is land use, not the people using the land. So while you can say, as Ryan did, that the future that he's mainly concerned about is our existing farm families being able to diversify into the future, you can't say that a new person who is essentially a different kind of farmer, even though it doesn't get covered by capital A agriculture, can't have access to that same set of rights.
Hey, Tara, I see your point. I was using the farmer as an example as
No,
opposed to saying
I
it
know,
has
you
to be
weren't
a
making
farmer.
this,
It's
yeah,
more
you
about
weren't making the
the
same point as
size,
JBL.
the size of the land, and that was really what it is. It doesn't have to be a farm. It could be just an open field, open space. It could be any of those other things. It could be someone that just owns a bunch of land and doesn't have a farm at all. It was just an example to illustrate a potential what if scenario, which is what I try to think of.
No, right, I actually, yeah, I'm just clarifying that the way JBL phrased it, again, crossed into that territory. So I see 3 hands up. I think what the order that they actually are supposed to be in now is Alvin, Ray, then Dan, because we skipped Alvin and then Ray gave up his spot, but so Alvin, Ray, Dan.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, back to number 7.
Mm-hmm.
The minimum size for a micro cultivator site
Okay,
shall be 200,000 square feet, in parentheses, 4.59 acres. And then semicolon, the enclosed site for cannabis shall
Yeah.
have 750 feet on all 4 sides.
750-foot setbacks on all 4 sides.
Correct.
Okay.
An enclosed site.
Okay, Ray.
Well, as pretentious as this was it for the people of town, I would almost like to see us get a survey of people in town for what they want in our town. Not just 10 people saying, hey, we're gonna do this. I think we ought to put out a question. It's I'm not saying a questionnaire, but something we should the resident should be polled on if we should even have this in our town.
We certainly can do that, Ray. I would take any such poll with a grain of salt, because what we know is that people who feel aggrieved respond, whereas people who are neutral or in favor of things often do not. So we certainly can come up with a simple survey to put out from the public. And you may certainly consider that, right, as you could consider any other public commentary. But I would caution you against relying too heavily on that, I guess is my point. Dan, then Jane. And Alvin, did you put your hand up again, or is that just still up from before?
Yeah, I'm gonna, that's it.
Okay, so Dan, then Jane.
So I know very little about this. I wasn't here when all this stuff happened. But I'm just kind of curious, for one, do we get a lot of requests for permits to grow weed in Thompson?
We've gotten one.
Okay.
And it was on a relatively small site, but it did conform to the regulations as they're currently written, right? So if that applicant had not withdrawn his application during that meeting because of the public outcry, this
Mhm.
commission would have been legally obliged to approve that permit as written. So
Okay.
based on that, we went back and put the 1-year moratorium on it to look at these regulations to make sure that they are what they want to be. Because I think at the time that they first passed these, microcultivator wasn't even it was in the statutes, but it was barely defined at all.
Right.
So it's changed over time, to Ryan's earlier point.
Okay. And then I would just, because the other thing that I was thinking of that goes along with that is I feel like the appeal for anybody growing cannabis as a business is diminishing because as the market gets flooded, if you look at people out west in the states where it's been legal for 15 years, they can't even get rid of it anymore. Like it's a problem. So, and even around here, it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. So like, for it to be where somebody's going to want to come in and start a big business, I don't think that that's like a big concern. But then the last thing I'll say about that is, if they don't do it here, they're going to go over the line and do it. So if we're thinking about business and taxes, and we create regulations so strict that you just can't be done here, then they're just going to go to neighboring places and do it anyway. So that's my thoughts.
Can I step in on that for a second?
It's up to Jane because she's
No,
next.
go ahead, Ray.
Well, from what I remember, it can't be sold over state lines. So somebody from Massachusetts can't be selling to somebody in Connecticut. And for us to make money on it, the town, we have to have a distribution center in our town because the town where it gets sold to makes the tax revenue, not us. So if them people would have had that one opened up, the town, the only thing we would have made any money off of is charging him taxes on his little tract that he was going up into his yard with.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
And nothing else, other than that, we don't make no money. There's no money for it unless we have a distribution center in our town. So that's one thing that, people should realize.
Well, just,
Okay, can I?
go ahead, Jane. Go ahead, then I
Okay.
want to come in.
Okay, one, to go to what Ray suggested as a survey of the residents, that can be very, very simple, yes or no. And that would give us an idea of where people stand. Just simple. Do you want to see pot allowed to be cultivated in Thompson? Yes or no? Number two, I'm going to go back to the fact that if we require it to be in an enclosed building, if we do decide to have the cultivation, the micro cultivation, that's going to take care of some of the other problems. Number three, as Ray alluded to, I did all the research and went and talked to 3 chiefs of police in Oxford, Webster, and Charlton and brought in all that information. We do not make the money on the cultivation. It is made on tax-wise. It is made on the distribution center. And it would be upwards of, back when I did it, which was what, I don't know how many years ago now, $300,000 to $400,000 a year that would be coming in from the distribution center. We will get next to nothing with the cultivation. So my suggestion is that we require it be enclosed in a building with setbacks in the designated areas, and that we put out a simple yes or no, which would give us an idea. We don't want to open up the floodgates to 9,000 people coming in and giving us their opinions. Yes or no.
9,000 people live in town. So actually, if you want to survey the town, you do actually want 9,000.
No, I mean, Tara, what I mean is I don't want to have an open forum where let's just go 5,000 people show up and they all want their 3 minutes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
See what I'm saying? A yes or no would be very simple and it would give us an idea. But I am still for requiring the cultivation to be enclosed, period.
Okay. Alvin, then Ray.
Yes.
Oh, tipped over me again, but that's okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's because I
That's
don't see
all
your
right.
hand up, JBL. Yes, JBL, you were next. So then JBL,
That's
Alvin,
okay.
then Ray.
Trying to figure out how to put my hand up on my iPad is driving me. I'm about ready to throw
When
it
you
out.
figure it out, you let me know.
You got that right. No, my thing with this here is that I got nothing against micro cultivation in a building. I'm 100, but we got to remember, everybody. I think you all forgot a little bit. We had a gentleman that came up in front of us, jumped through all the hoops, did everything by right, got his name on the state list, and he fixed that property up on Riverside Drive, what used to be the old Jason restaurant, and he did a nice thing, hoping that he would get the license to be a dispensary. That's where our tax revenue would have come in, like Jane and them said. So this guy lost it because of the political pull in Putnam and everything. Sorry, Cindy, but they now own two. But also you got to remember, we were closer to Massachusetts. We would have been drawing people in from Oxford, Southbridge, or whatever, in Sturbridge and all that too. But the thing is, you look at all these dispensaries that came together and existed 2-3 years ago. Right now, if I remember correctly, I saw the numbers. There was 4 of them that are closing down, and they were supposedly making good money. And in Massachusetts, there were like 10 of them that have been closing down, like Ryan said, because the market is flooded and everything with people growing so much. So we're caught, you end up being caught between a pig and a poke here. So, like Jane said and Ray's, we need to look at this. Are we gonna make money off of it? If somebody, puts a building up, we're gonna get tax money on the building, whatever equipment he owns. There's gonna be some tax money there. But the dispensary would have been the biggest asset for us, but that's blown out the window.
Well, the good news is that the special permit runs with the land. So if markets change, he still has that special permit.
Correct.
And if he has that special permit and markets change and a dispensary actually successfully goes in there, you could, in fact, if you had a microcultivator in town, have a closed system, right? Or something like a closed system. There's more reasons to do or not do any given thing than things as simple as tax revenue, although tax revenue is certainly how the state sells it. It's also entrepreneurship for its own sake. It is, again, not capital A agricultural, but lowercase a agricultural. I would argue there's a cogent argument to be made that therefore it is appropriate in a town that sees itself as agricultural, even though it is a newer form of agriculture. Those are philosophical things for you guys to discuss. Alvin, then Ray, then we're pretty close to time, so we'll just talk about logistics.
Okay, one quick thing. Would you please put in your notes there that I am recommending that this be required to be enclosed, Tara?
I think I already did, actually, up here.
Oh, I don't know.
Jane,
Okay.
Jane suggesting.
Okay, thank you, because I can't see up there. Okay. And then if we have time, I have a couple of more things.
Well, why don't you just say them now then, since we're wrapping up, and then Alvin, then Ray.
Take your glasses off the top of your head.
Okay, no, I'll let them go. I'll let them go.
Alvin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just to remind all the commissioners that cannabis is a lottery. The state of Connecticut determines where most all these cultivators or hemps is all done by lottery. As that poor guy here on Riverside Drive who spent thousands of dollars hoping that he'd have a place to sell cannabis. And it just never happened. It will not happen. And one more thing, I did mention with the side setbacks, growing facility with within an enclosed space.
Okay.
That'd be that 4.59 acres. That's a pretty big enclosure.
Very good. Ray, you're up.
I just want to go back for that polling thing. You know, we have an election coming up, and the way to do something like that would be to put 2 questions on our ballot. One of them, do you want one in town, and do you want indoor or outdoor grow, or both? You know,
Well-
it could be 2 questions on our ballot, and that way there, you know, we don't have just certain people doing it. That's everybody that votes at our election should be there to do that.
Ray,
So-
I love the idea, but the state of Connecticut, it's not as easy to get a ballot question as it is in Massachusetts. And even if it was as easy as it is in Massachusetts, you still need thousands of signatures just to get a ballot question on a ballot. It's not, you can't attach an unrelated survey to a ballot. You could have people outside the polling place with a tablet or a clipboard, but it can't be a ballot question.
Okay.
That is a very specific, in all the, I mean, I've only lived in Connecticut 10 years.
But you
in
are,
the-
Tara, you are correct.
Yeah, but in the 10 years that I've lived in Connecticut, I've only ever seen one ballot question. If you lived across the line in Massachusetts, sometimes they have 4 and 5 because it's a relatively frictionless process. But yeah, that's a legal process, Ray. It's a great idea.
Okay, I just figured, you know, with the election coming up, that I didn't think it would have been that big of a.
I will add a note here to consider an
It
exit
is-
poll.
As soon as you're done with that, Tara, let me know. I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned, okay? When you're done.
Well, before we do that, do you want to, no, let's just adjourn it because there's
We,
people who aren't
what we
here.
need to do is, let's get a consensus on when do you want to have the next subcommittee? Because we're not gonna touch this in a regular meeting. So we're probably gonna end up with what, 1 or 2 more subcommittees in the meantime?
So I figure definitely one more. So we've got October, November, December. You've got to get this on your
how about-
agenda for acceptance for public hearing in January.
Okay, so how about if we have a meeting after the elections, like the second week of November or something like that, have a subcommittee then, that would be best, because we're getting close to the election and all this other stuff.
I think we can probably fit one in October,
Okay,
JBL, but
yep.
I would rather let me poll you guys via email because Joe's not here. Santos isn't here. Russ isn't here.
Well, Joe is-
Bosky's not here.
Joe and
So,
them, Joe
yeah.
won't be back until the end of the month of October, correct?
no, he'll be back and then he's going out again.
Yeah, okay, all
So
right.
what I'll do is, I thought I was gonna be out of the office tomorrow still, but the 4th day of the class is one I didn't need to go to. So I will be in the office tomorrow.
Okay.
So I can do these minutes, send out an email poll to you guys with a couple of suggested dates for October. Ryan, for your purposes, we can look at the regular meeting minutes. I can do a draft edit tomorrow. That's not these minutes. I do these and those are fine. So I will do all of those things tomorrow and then everybody, both who was here and wasn't here, will get a chance to weigh in.
All right, Tara, I will be out of town until, so when you put that poll out, what are you talking, like the middle of October, looking for those dates?
Hold on one second. Let me get my
Don't,
book.
don't forget, the 15th of October is that debate night, and then the 22nd of October is the debate night.
Yeah, I've got all those dates in my book.
Okay, just
let me see
reminding
here.
you.
Let me just
Just
take a
remind-
quick look. I have one.
How about October 1st?
No,
That's the public
Only
presentation.
kidding.
I'm just looking at the number of days I have open. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 possible dates in October. They are all before the regular meeting in
oh,
October.
okay.
Most of them are Thursdays and maybe 1 or 2 Mondays. So I will send those out tomorrow. And then, as usual, majority rules, the most people who are available for whichever date will be the next one. But I expect we will have at least 2, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably 1 meeting in each of those months, October, November, December. And we can hold the possibility of an early January meeting if we really need to wrap something up before we apply for the public hearing.
We can have a special meeting on this just to.
We have to, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, anybody got anything else?
Anybody? Otherwise, forever hold your peace. Meeting adjourned at 9:05. How's that?
Good night.
Have a
All
great
right.
night, everybody.
Right.
Thank you, Tara.
You're so welcome.
Have a good one.
All right, thank you.